Armed with the Queen's mandate, Lily dismantles the corrupt ministry, while a tactical Harry uses pure science to hunt the Basilisk. The pureblood era ends today. Hit subscribe, drop a like, and comment present below to mark your attendance before we start the mission. The Berkshires in mid-July were suffocatingly humid, the air thick with the scent of baked pine and damp earth. Deep within the forest, in the magically warded cabin that did not exist on any map, the atmosphere was even heavier. It was the weight of impending war. Harry Potter, now 12 years old, hung upside down from the thick branch of an ancient oak tree, his knees locked over the bark. Sweat dripped from his messy jet-black hair, past his round glasses, falling into the dry dirt below. He wasn't playing. He was holding a heavy iron kettle suspended 3 feet in the air, using nothing but wandless magic and raw intent. "Your spatial anchor is drifting, Harry," Lily called out from the porch. She stood leaning against the wooden railing, a mug of black coffee in her hand. Her dark red hair was pulled back in its usual severe knot, and her sharp green eyes tracked the microscopic tremors of the hovering kettle. "Gravity is a constant," Harry grunted, the muscles in his core burning. "I'm adjusting the localized atmospheric pressure to compensate for the weight, but the humidity is interfering with the kinetic transfer." "Then don't fight the humidity, use it. Bind the moisture in the air to the iron," Lily instructed, her voice crisp. Harry closed his eyes, filtering out the pain. He accessed the White Room in his mind, the mental fortress his mother had taught him to build to compartmentalize pain and emotion. He felt the dampness in the air and visualized it snapping to the kettle like magnetic frost. The trembling stopped. The kettle locked into place in midair, perfectly still. "Better," Lily said, stepping back inside. "Drop it and come in. We have legal precedent to review." Harry released his hold. The kettle slammed into the dirt with a heavy thud. He flipped down from the branch, landing lightly on the balls of his feet, and followed his mother inside. The interior of the cabin had transformed over the summer. While it was still essentially a library that someone happened to sleep in, the central wooden table was no longer just covered in potion ingredients and Muggle science textbooks. It was buried under mountains of legal scrolls, international magical treaties, and diplomatic dossiers. Lily had spent the past month furious. She had let Albus Dumbledore test her son. She had watched as a possessed teacher, a 3-headed dog, and a lethal devil snare were left as hurdles for first years. It was a systemic, catastrophic failure of adult responsibility. "The British Ministry of Magic is not a government," Lily stated, pacing around the table. "It is a glorified country club run by inbred, nostalgic aristocrats who use wands instead of golf clubs. They are incompetent, heavily prejudiced, and strategically blind." Harry wiped his face with a towel and looked at a chart pinned to the wall. It detailed the Wizengamot, the UK's magical parliament. Next to names like Lucius Malfoy and Cornelius Fudge, Lily had written in red ink, "Bribed, incompetent, liability." "So what is the objective for Year 2, Professor?" Harry asked, his tone shifting into the analytical cadence he used when planning. Lily stopped pacing and looked at her son. "Last year, our objective was reconnaissance and survival. We achieved both. You secured the asset, and we neutralized the immediate host. But Voldemort's spirit is still out there, and the environment at Hogwarts makes it a breeding ground for his return. This year, we aren't just surviving, Harry. We are auditing." 3 days later, Lily stood in the gleaming Art Deco lobby of the Woolworth Building in New York City, the headquarters of the Magical Congress of the United States of America, MACUSA. She wore a sharp-tailored muggle suit that made her look like a high-powered Wall Street executive, a stark contrast to the archaic robes favored in Britain. She was ushered into the office of the Director of Magical Law Enforcement. Director Graves, a stern man with graying temples and a sharp gaze, gestured for her to sit. "Miss Evans," Graves said, glancing at a file. "Or should I say Mrs. Potter. We've known your true identity for years, of course. Your work as a freelance potioneer is unparalleled, so we turned a blind eye to your undocumented status. But requesting a formal summit, that exposes you." "I am past caring about exposure, Director," Lily said coldly. She placed a thick leather binder on his desk. "I am here to report a Class XXXX threat, gross negligence, and the harboring of a dark spirit at Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry." Graves frowned, opening the binder. As he read the detailed accounts of the Philosopher's Stone, the troll incident, and the possession of Quirinius Quiriel, his face paled. "Albus Dumbledore allowed a Dark Lord to teach children?" Graves whispered, horrified. "Dumbledore views his students as acceptable collateral in his grand chess game," Lily replied smoothly, "and the British Ministry is too busy taking bribes from former Death Eaters to notice. Voldemort is going to return, Director. When he does, he won't stop at the borders of the UK. Magical Britain is a cancer waiting to metastasize." "What are you asking for, Lily?" "I need MACUSA to officially denounce the security standards of the UK Ministry.
I need American legal versements netted at Hogwarts, and I need diplomatic clearance to bypass the Ministry of Magic entirely. Graves leaned back. Bypass the Ministry? To speak to whom? The International Confederation of Witchcraft? Lily offered a thin, dangerous smile. No, the ICW is just as bogged down in bureaucracy. I am going to speak to the landlord.
While his mother played international politics, Harry was in the cabin's reinforced basement, preparing for war. He stood at his workbench, examining his wand. American hornbeam, rigid, phoenix feather from a smoke phoenix. It hummed with a low, vibrating energy, demanding absolute focus. Localized environmental manipulation, turning water to frictionless ice to weaponize the creature's own mass. The Devil's Snare had required high-yield thermal plasma. Voldemort had required the agonizing activation of his mother's blood protection. Relying on sheer luck and biological defenses was tactically unsound. Threat parameters for Year 2, unknown, Harry muttered to himself, scribbling on a whiteboard. If the headmaster hides immortality stones, what else is buried in the castle? He turned to his chemistry set. Magic in Britain was treated as a mystical art. Harry treated it as a programmable physics engine. He began drafting schematics. He needed better gear. He pulled out a set of dragonhide gloves, similar to the ones he used for handling boomslang skin. He began weaving enchantments into the leather, kinetic absorption charms to block blunt force trauma, and chemical resistance spells. Next, he modified a pair of Muggle safety goggles. Using an intricate arithmetic formula, he layered a polarized shielding charm over the lenses, designed to filter out visual cognitohazards and blinding hexes. He didn't know what was waiting for him in the shadows of Hogwarts, but he knew that a wizard who only relied on the Latin words in a textbook was a wizard who would eventually be outsmarted. He looked at a jar of preserved venom on his shelf. Biology, he thought. If someone attacks with a biological weapon, I need a chemical counteragent. He began cross-referencing Muggle toxicology reports with his potions textbook, modifying recipes to decrease brewing times through finer ingredient surface areas, a trick that had thoroughly unsettled Professor Snape. Harry Potter was not returning to school as a student. He was returning as a highly calibrated countermeasure. By early August, Lily's plan had reached its most delicate phase. Through MACUSA's non-magical liaisons in the U.S. State Department, Lily had managed to get a highly classified dossier routed to a very specific desk in London, the desk of the Director General of MI5, who held the highly guarded portfolio of magical liaison to the Crown. Magical Britain operated under the delusion that they were completely independent. They forgot that the Statute of Secrecy, signed in 1689, was not a declaration of independence, it was a treaty of separation. And ultimately, the land they walked on, the airspace they flew in, and the citizens they governed still legally belonged to the sovereign. Lily sat at the kitchen table in the Berkshires, watching a Muggle satellite phone ring. She picked it up. Evans. This is Director Hawthorne, MI5. A crisp, posh British voice echoed through the encrypted line. We have reviewed the dossier you sent via the diplomatic pouch. Is this a joke, Miss Evans? Are you truly alleging that a domestic terrorist cell, previously thought eradicated, has infiltrated a boarding school in Scotland? It is not a joke, Director, Lily said, her voice steady. The magical government is actively suppressing this information. They are compromised at the highest levels. Lucius Malfoy, a known financier of the terrorist group known as the Death Eaters, practically dictates policy to Minister Fudge. The security of the realm is at risk. There was a long pause on the line. The allegations regarding the prison, Azkaban, you state they use demonic entities for guard duty. Dementors, yes. They feed on human despair and are sanctioned by the Ministry. It is a confirmed, Lily. It is a gross violation of human rights, and frankly, it is a ticking time bomb. If Voldemort returns, those creatures will side with him instantly. Miss Evans, Hawthorne said carefully, if what you have provided is true, this is a breach of the Sovereign Magical Accords. The Ministry of Magic operates under the grace of the Crown, provided they keep their world contained and safe. They are failing. Which is why I am requesting an audience, Lily said, her eyes flashing green fire. Not with the Ministry of Magic, with Her Majesty. Hawthorne sighed. You are asking to open a door that has been closed for 300 years. If you are wrong, you will spend the rest of your life in a black site. I am not wrong, Lily said. I am a mother who refuses to let a corrupt government sacrifice my son to cover up their own incompetence. Set the meeting, Director. The final week of August arrived with a crisp chill in the Berkshire air. Inside the cabin, trunks were packing themselves. Books flew from shelves, and cauldrons scrubbed themselves clean. Harry stood by the door, wearing dark Muggle jeans, combat boots, and a tailored black jacket. He looked older, leaner, and utterly focused. His snowy owl, Hedwig, hooted softly from her cage. Lily emerged from her bedroom, wearing a charcoal gray suit that radiated authority. She checked her watch. "The port key to JFK Airport leaves in 10 minutes, Lily said. "From there, we fly private to Heathrow. MACUSA has provided a security detail that will pose as diplomatic attachés." Harry nodded, checking the holster strapped to his forearm where his hornbeam wand rested. "What is the tactical objective upon arrival in London?" "Shock and awe," Lily said, handing him his boarding pass. "We bypass Diagon Alley. We bypass the Ministry. We go straight to Buckingham Palace. Once the Queen signs the mandate, the UK Ministry's autonomy is suspended pending a full audit." Harry permitted himself a small, sharp smile, the kind that would have terrified Snape. "I look forward to seeing the Wizengamot forced to pass a standardized exam." "Many will fail," Lily said, her expression hardening. "And when they do, we will cut the rot out of that society by the root. Are you ready, Hawk?" Harry looked at the cabin, the sanctuary where he had been forged into a weapon. He didn't feel nostalgic. He felt prepared. "I'm tired of playing their games, Mom," Harry said, his emerald eyes cold and clear. "Let's go teach them how the real world works." They stepped off the porch, the heavy oak door shutting behind them. With a loud crack of apparition, the Evans family vanished from the American woods, bringing a storm of accountability across the Atlantic. Magical Britain had no idea what was coming. The air in the private drawing room of Buckingham Palace smelled of lemon polish and centuries of quiet, absolute power. The rain lashed against the bulletproof glass overlooking the gardens, but inside, the silence was absolute. Lily Evans sat with perfect military straight posture in a wingback chair. Across from her sat Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II. Standing nervously by the door was Director Hawthorne of MI5, holding a briefcase that felt entirely too heavy. "You present a highly disturbing narrative, Mrs. Potter," the Queen said, her voice quiet but carrying a weight that commanded the room. She was reviewing the thick dossier MACUSA had helped Lily compile. Photographs of the destroyed third-floor corridor at Hogwarts, magical signatures of the troll, and sworn affidavits regarding the horrific conditions of Azkaban prison were spread across the antique table. "It is not a narrative, Your Majesty. It is a forensic reality," Lily replied smoothly. "The Ministry of Magic operates under the delusion of complete sovereignty. They have forgotten the 1689 Accords. They are permitted self-governance only so long as they do not endanger the realm. Last year, a domestic terrorist known as Voldemort infiltrated a school filled with hundreds of British children, all while the Minister of Magic was busy accepting campaign donations from former Death Eaters." The Queen's eyes narrowed slightly as she picked up a photograph of Lucius Malfoy standing next to Cornelius Fudge. "And this man? The one who finances this systemic rot?" "Lucius Malfoy," Lily said, her voice dropping to a dangerous chill. "He claims he was under mind control during the First War. In reality, he bought his freedom and now dictates legislation. If Voldemort returns, and the evidence suggests he is actively trying, Malfoy's wealth will fund a second magical war. A war that will undoubtedly spill into your streets, Your Majesty. Magical Britain is not a government, it is a liability." The Queen looked at Hawthorne. "Director, are her assessments accurate regarding the threat level?" "Yes, ma'am," Hawthorne said stiffly. "If an extremist magical faction were to target London infrastructure, our non-magical countermeasures would be severely inadequate. The Ministry of Magic's Orator Department is underfunded, poorly trained, and compromised." The Queen set the dossier down. She folded her hands. "My ancestors granted the magical community the right to hide, Mrs. Potter. We did not grant them the right to foster terrorism in our backyard. What is it you require?" Lily stood up and placed a centuries-old yellowed parchment on the table. "The Sovereign's Audit, an invocation of the Crown's ultimate authority over the magical ministry. I require the mandate to bypass Minister Fudge, freeze the assets of compromised Wizengamot members, and restructure the security of Hogwarts from the ground up." The Queen picked up a gold fountain pen. She didn't hesitate. "You have your mandate, Royal Inquisitor. Clean my house."
The atrium of the Ministry of Magic was a spectacle of opulent, ignorant wealth. It was the annual end-of-summer gala. Golden fountains flowed with expensive wine, and witches and wizards in elaborate, archaic robes mingled, congratulating themselves on another year of peaceful stagnation. Cornelius Fudge, wearing a lime-green bowler hat and a self-important smile, was standing on a raised dais, preparing to give his keynote address. Beside him stood Lucius Malfoy, looking bored and superior, tapping his silver-handled cane. "Ladies and gentlemen," Fudge began, his voice magically amplified to echo off the polished dark wood walls. "We gather tonight to celebrate the continued prosperity of our great society." The heavy, golden gates of the atrium did not just open. They were blown off their hinges by a concussive shockwave of wandless magic. The music stopped instantly. Crystal goblets shattered. Lily Potter walked through the smoke. She was not wearing robes. She wore a tailored black muggle suit, a crisp white shirt, and a long, dark trench coat. Flanking her were 6 heavily armed MACUSA aurors, wearing tactical dragonhide armor, their wands drawn and humming with kinetic energy. The silence in the atrium was deafening. "What is the meaning of this?" Fudge stammered, his face turning the color of curdled milk. "Guards, aurors, arrest these interlopers." A few British aurors stepped forward, but the Americans raised their wands, their stances disciplined and lethal. The British aurors, used to breaking up pub brawls and chasing petty thieves, froze under the tactical superiority. Lily walked straight up to the dais. She didn't shout. She didn't have to. She cast a localized sonorous charm on herself. "Cornelius Fudge," Lily said, her voice ringing like a struck bell. "By the authority of the Sovereign Accords of 1689, and under the direct mandate of Her Majesty the Queen, your absolute authority is hereby suspended." Gasps echoed through the hall. Lucius Malfoy sneered, though his grip on his cane tightened. "This is absurd. You are a dead woman, Evans. You have no jurisdiction here. The Muggle crown has no power over the Wizengamot." "You should read your history, Lucius," Lily said, pulling the royal mandate from her coat and holding it aloft. The parchment glowed with a blinding, golden magical signature, the ancient magic of the land itself recognizing the crown's decree. "The ministry exists by permission. Permission that you have abused. As of this moment, I am the royal magical auditor." She turned to the MACUSA commander. "Commander Graves, execute Protocol Alpha." Graves stepped forward. "Lucius Malfoy, your vaults at Gringotts are officially frozen pending an audit of your financial ties to known domestic terrorist factions. You are barred from leaving the country." Malfoy's pale face flushed with rage. "You cannot do this. I demand to see the minister." "The minister," Lily said, looking at a trembling Fudge, "is currently under investigation for accepting bribes to overlook the possession of Class A dark artifacts. The gala is over. The audit begins tomorrow morning at 800 hours. Attendance for all Wizengamot members is mandatory. Failure to appear will be treated as an admission of treason." Lily turned on her heel and walked out, leaving the highest echelon of magical Britain in a state of absolute, shattered panic. Hogwarts' School of Witchcraft and Wizardry felt different. The ancient magic in the stones seemed to hum with anxious anticipation. Harry Potter sat comfortably in a high-backed chair in the headmaster's office, analyzing the myriad of silver instruments spinning on Dumbledore's desk. Inefficient tracking devices, Harry noted mentally, likely tied to blood wards or proximity alarms, easily bypassed with a Faraday cage charm. Albus Dumbledore sat behind his desk, his eyes lacking their usual twinkle. He looked older, his gaze fixed on the woman pacing the floor. Lily slapped a thick stack of parchment on the center of Dumbledore's desk. "What is this, Lily?" Dumbledore asked softly. "That, Albus, is a magically binding contract, and you are going to sign it, or I am going to use my royal mandate to have you removed as headmaster by noon," Lily stated, crossing her arms. Dumbledore sighed, steepling his fingers. "Lily, I understand you are angry about last year, but you must see the broader picture. Voldemort—" "Do not lecture me about the broader picture," Lily snapped, leaning over the desk, her green eyes blazing. "Your picture involved putting my 11-year-old son in a dungeon with a troll, a 3-headed dog, and a possessed teacher to test his moral fiber. You treat this school like a chessboard and these children like pawns." "Harry is the child of prophecy," Dumbledore said gravely. "He must be prepared." "I am preparing him," Lily countered, her voice dropping to a lethal whisper. "I have taught him physics, combat tactics, and wandless intent. You taught him how to blindly walk into a trap. That ends today." Harry spoke up from his chair, his tone calm and analytical. "Professor, relying on a localized prophecy to dictate national security strategy is a statistical fallacy. It breeds complacency. You allowed the adults to do nothing while waiting for a child to solve the problem." Dumbledore looked at Harry, genuinely unsettled by the boy's cold logic.
Love is the only power he knows not, Harry. No, sir, Harry said. Kinetic energy, thermodynamics, and tactical preparation are the powers he knows not. Voldemort is an egomaniac who relies on fear and archaic curses. He is highly predictable. Lily tapped the contract. Here are the new terms, Albus. Total transparency. If there is a threat to this school, you tell me. You tell the staff. No more hiding lethal artifacts behind wooden doors locked with an Alakazam chum. No more secret tests. You will submit to a weekly security audit conducted by me. If you withhold information regarding the safety of these students, the magic in this contract will strip you of your magic and your title. Dumbledore read over the parchment. It was flawlessly written, combining Muggle contract law with an unbreakable vow adjacent binding. You would cripple my ability to maneuver in the coming war. I am taking the war out of your hands, Lily corrected. You failed the last one, Albus. You let my husband die. You let my friends die. I am not letting you gamble with my son. Dumbledore looked at the fierce, unyielding mother and the quiet, dangerously intelligent boy. He realized with a heavy heart that his era of unchecked manipulation had officially ended. He picked up a blood quill and signed his name.
The Ministry of Magic Examination Hall on Level 4 was usually reserved for standardized OWL and NEWT testing. Today, it was filled with the highest-ranking members of the Wizengamot. They looked ridiculous. Men and women who had spent decades resting on the laurels of their sacred 28 bloodlines were now sweating under the harsh fluorescent lights Lily had insisted be installed, replacing the dim atmospheric candles. Lily stood at the front of the hall, flanked by 2 American auditors. "You have 2 hours for the written portion," Lily announced, looking directly at a pale, furious Lucius Malfoy. "This exam will test your knowledge of modern magical theory, international magical law, and basic non-magical logistics, because if you are going to govern a world that borders theirs, you need to know how a telephone works." "This is a degradation," Madame Umbridge piped up from the second row, clutching a pink cardigan. "To be treated like school children." "You are being treated like public servants, Madame Umbridge, which is what you are," Lily cut her off smoothly. "And frankly, based on your department's budget allocations over the last 5 years, school children possess a firmer grasp of economics." Harry had helped his mother design the tests. They were brutal. They didn't ask for wand movements. They asked for the arithmetic breakdown of why a shield charm failed under sustained thermal assault. They asked for the legal definition of human rights under the Geneva Conventions, a concept the magical world had gleefully ignored. But the written test was only the beginning. Following the exam, each member was called into a private room for a mandatory interview. Lucius Malfoy sat in the stark white interrogation room. Lily slid a small vial of clear liquid across the table. 3 drops, Mr. Malfoy. Standard Veritas serum, she said. "I refuse," Lucius spat. "You have no right to drug a peer of the realm." "You are not a peer of the realm. You are a suspect in an audit sanctioned by the Crown," Lily said. "Refusal to take the serum results in immediate, permanent expulsion from the Wizengamot and a transfer of your case to non-magical MI5 authorities. Would you like to see how Scotland Yard handles suspected domestic terrorists?" Lucius glared at her with pure, unadulterated hatred. His hand trembled as he took the vial and placed 3 drops on his tongue. His eyes immediately glazed over. "Let's begin," Lily said, opening a file. "Mr. Malfoy, in the past 5 years, how many galleons have you funneled to Minister Fudge in exchange for the deregulation of dark artifact trading?" 75,000, Lucius said, his voice completely devoid of emotion, compelled by the potion. "And do you possess artifacts in your home intended to cause bodily harm, subvert the government, or assist in the resurrection of the terrorist known as Voldemort?" Lucius's jaw locked, fighting the serum, but the magic was too strong. Lily closed the file. "Thank you, Mr. Malfoy. Commander Graves, please take Mr. Malfoy to a holding cell. We will be dispatching a Cursebreaker team to his manor and wheelchair immediately." By the end of the week, the Ministry of Magic was decimated. Over half the Wizengamot had been suspended, fired, or arrested. The pureblood supremacy structure wasn't just cracking. It was being methodically, legally demolished. September 1st arrived, and the Great Hall of Hogwarts buzzed with a different kind of energy. The Daily Prophet headlines had been screaming all week. Royal Audit Purges Ministry, Malfoy arrested, Fudge ousted. Harry sat at the Gryffindor table, meticulously slicing his steak. He noted the structural changes in the room. Dumbledore looked subdued at the high table. Snape looked profoundly uncomfortable. His eyes darted toward Lily, who sat confidently in the Muggle studies chair, wearing a sharp blazer. Draco Malfoy marched up to the Gryffindor table. He looked haggard, his usual pristine arrogance replaced by a frantic, cornered energy. "You think this is funny, Potter?" Malfoy snarled, slamming his hands on the table. "Your mother having my father arrested? When the Dark Lord returns—" "Lower your voice, Malfoy. You're becoming hysterical," Harry said, not looking up from his plate.
Ron Weasley, who had spent the summer exchanging letters with Harry and reading a few introductory logic books Harry had sent him, chimed in. Yeah, Malfoy, statistically speaking, shouting your allegiance to a dead terrorist while your family assets are frozen is a poor long-term strategy. Malfoy drew his wand. I'll curse you, Weasley. Harry moved faster than a striking snake. He didn't draw his wand. He simply kicked Malfoy's kneecap under the table with his steel-toed combat boot. As Malfoy buckled with a gasp of pain, he grabbed the boy's wand wrist and applied a precise pressure point lock. Assaulting a student with a deadly weapon, Harry said quietly, his emerald eyes boring into Malfoy's terrified gray ones. That's a felony, Draco. Given your family's current legal standing, I'd suggest you learn to adapt to the new hierarchy. Magic won't save you if you don't have the brains to use it correctly. Sit down and eat your vegetables. Harry released him. Malfoy stumbled back, clutching his wrist, and retreated to the Slytherin table in total humiliation. Hermione Granger watched Harry with wide eyes. That was incredibly efficient. Physics and leverage, Hermione, Harry said, taking a bite of his steak. Later that afternoon, the third-year Slytherins and Gryffindors filed into the Muggle Studies classroom. The room had been completely gutted. Instead of dusty chalkboards and bizarre diagrams of rubber ducks, the room featured tiered seating and a large pull-down projection screen. Lily Evans stood at the front, her arms crossed. Welcome to Muggle Studies, she announced to the silent room. For the past century, this class has been treated as a joke, a place for purebloods to laugh at people who don't have magic. Today, the joke ends. She flicked her wand, dimming the lights. A Muggle film projector clicked to life in the back of the room. You have been taught that magic makes you superior, Lily continued, pacing the aisles. You believe that because a Muggle cannot cast a localized fire-making spell, they are weak. I am here to cure you of your catastrophic ignorance. The screen flashed to life. It showed black and white footage of a mushroom cloud rising over the Trinity test site. The sheer, terrifying, apocalyptic power of a nuclear explosion. The students gasped. Pansy Parkinson let out a small shriek. That, she said softly, is not magic. That is science. That is the splitting of an atom. Muggles do not need a wand to level a city. They can do it with a push of a button from thousands of miles away. The footage shifted to the Apollo 11 moon landing. While the Ministry of Magic is struggling to regulate the thickness of cauldron bottoms, Muggles have left this planet and walked on the stars. They possess communication networks that connect billions of people instantly. They have medicines that eradicate diseases your healing potions can barely touch. Lily walked back to the front of the room and turned on the lights. She looked at the pale, shocked faces of the pureblood students. Magic is a tool, Lily stated, her voice echoing in the quiet room. It is a beautiful, powerful tool. But if you rely on it blindly, if you refuse to adapt, evolve, and understand the world outside these castle walls, you will be left behind. This year, you will learn chemistry, you will learn logic, and you will learn exactly how behind-premised of the world you truly are. Class dismissed. Harry sat in the back row, a proud smile playing on his lips. The audit had successfully begun. The rot was being exposed. Now they just had to wait for whatever monster was hiding in the castle to make its move. And when it did, Harry Potter would be ready to dissect it.
Halloween arrived at Hogwarts, but Harry Potter had zero interest in the feast. While the rest of the school gorged themselves on candied apples and pumpkin pasties, Harry was in the second-floor corridor, tracking a localized auditory anomaly. He had heard the voice first in the Gryffindor common room, a dry, rasping hiss sliding through the stone walls, speaking of hunger and tearing flesh. Most people would have panicked or questioned their sanity. Harry immediately checked the architectural blueprints he had requested from the library, cross-referencing the castle's archaic plumbing with the path of the sound. The acoustic resonance suggests the source is moving through the pipes, Harry murmured into a small, enchanted dictaphone Lily had given him. Estimated size? Massive, based on the displacement of air vibrating through the grating. He turned a corner and stopped dead. The corridor was flooded. A thin sheet of water reflected the flickering torchlight. Hanging by her tail from a torch bracket was Mrs. Norris, the caretaker's cat. She was stiff as a board, her eyes wide and blank. Footsteps echoed. Dumbledore, Filch, and several professors, including Snape, hurried onto the scene, having been alerted by the sudden drop in the localized ward temperature. Filch shrieked, instantly accusing Harry. "Silence, Argus," Dumbledore said gravely. He stepped forward, his wand drawn, preparing to cast a diagnostic charm. The cat has been petrified, dark magic of the most advanced kind. "Professor, step back, please. You're contaminating the scene," Harry said, his voice cutting through the tension like a scalpel. Dumbledore blinked, pausing mid-wave. Harry didn't look at the headmaster. He reached into his tactical jacket and pulled out a pair of thin, dragon-hide gloves, snapping them onto his hands. He knelt beside the puddle of water, pulling a small glass vial and a dropper from his belt. "What is the boy doing?"
Professor McGonagall whispered, bewildered. Forensics, Harry answered smoothly. He collected a sample of the water. Notice the position of the cat, Professor. The jaw is not slack, the fur is not singed. This wasn't a curse cast from a wand. It was a biological response to an environmental trigger. Snape leaned in, his black eyes narrowing with sharp interest. Explain your hypothesis, Potter. The water, Harry said, pointing to the puddle. It's leaking from Moaning Myrtle's bathroom. The cat didn't look directly at the threat. She saw its reflection in the water. The refractive index of the liquid dispersed the lethality of the attack. It acted as a filter. If she had looked directly at the source, she would be dead. He stood up, bagging the vial. We are dealing with a class XXXX creature that utilizes a visual cognitohazard as its primary kill vector. A basilisk is the most statistically probable candidate. I highly recommend we establish a quarantine zone. Dumbledore stared at the 12-year-old boy. He had expected a frightened child caught in the wrong place at the wrong time. Instead, he was looking at a miniature crime scene investigator who had deduced in 2 minutes what usually took the Ministry weeks to figure out. I will inform your mother, Dumbledore said quietly. She already knows, Harry replied, tapping the enchanted comlink in his ear. While Hogwarts reeled from the attack, the true war was being fought in London. The Prophet's headline the next morning read, Wizengamot in shambles, Royal Auditor seizes dark artifacts. Lily Evans was standing in the center of the Department of Magical Law Enforcement. The room, usually filled with lazy bureaucrats tossing paper airplanes, was operating with military precision. American MACUSA agents in tactical gear moved purposefully between desks, auditing decades of ignored case files. Cornelius Fudge was gone. Stripped of his title, he was currently sitting in a holding cell, weeping softly as Crown accountants went through his offshore gringos accounts. Lucius Malfoy's situation was far worse. Lily stood before the two-way mirror of Interrogation Room 3. Inside, a haggard, stripped-down Lucius sat cuff-cuffed to a steel table. Director Hawthorne of MI5 stood next to Lily, holding a cup of terrible ministry tea. Your curse-breakers found quite the hoard under his drawing room floorboards, Mrs. Potter. Poisons, cursed jewelry, and several items that possess parasitic soul signatures. Has he confessed to planting anything at Hogwarts? Asked Lily, her eyes cold. Not yet. He's claiming diplomatic immunity, demanding to speak to the minister, Hawthorne scoffed. He doesn't seem to understand that the minister works for me now, said Lily. She hit the intercom button. Mr. Malfoy, we have found the trapdoor under your manor. The Royal Crown is charging you with funding domestic terrorism and possessing weapons of mass destruction. If you do not tell me exactly what you smuggled into Hogwarts this year, I will have you transferred to a Muggler maximum security prison. You will not have magic, you will not have your wealth, you will simply be a number. Inside the room, Lucius paled violently. The threat of Azkaban was one thing. The threat of being stripped of his magical superiority and thrown into a concrete box with Mugglers broke him. A diary, Lucius whispered, his voice cracking. A diary. I slipped it into the Weasley girls' cauldron at Flourish and Blots. The Dark Lord gave it to me years ago. He said it would open the Chamber of Secrets. Lily's blood ran cold. Hawthorne, she said, turning to the MI5 director. Lock him in the deepest hole you have. I need to get to Scotland.
Back at Hogwarts, Harry had converted an abandoned classroom on the 4th floor into a tactical war room. The walls were covered in architectural blueprints, plumbing diagrams, and arithmetic calculations. Ron Weasley and Hermione Granger sat at a table covered in wires, leather straps, and mirrored glass. So, let me get this straight, Ron said, twisting a piece of copper wiring. You can speak to snakes, and instead of thinking you're turning into a dark wizard, you think it's just a biological frequency? Parseltongue is a genetic trait, Ron. It's a specialized vocal cord mutation that allows the speaker to produce and comprehend acoustic frequencies outside the normal human auditory range, Harry explained, marking a red X on a map of the 2nd floor. The basilisk uses the plumbing. The pipes act as an acoustic amplifier for its voice. That's how it's moving undetected. And the kill vector is visual, Hermione added, looking up from a massive ancient tome titled Most Macabre Monstrosities. Harry's right. The book confirms it. The basilisk, king of serpents. Its gaze brings instant death. If Mrs. Norris saw it in the water, she only received a fraction of the lethal dosage. Which brings us to countermeasures, Harry said, walking over to the table. He picked up the contraption Hermione was building. It looked like a pair of Muggle welding goggles, but the lenses were heavily modified. Polarized reflective visors, Hermione explained proudly. I used a one-way mirror charm layered with a refractive dispersal hex. If you look at the basilisk through these, the magic of its gaze will bounce back and forth within the lenses, diluting the lethal magic into a harmless flash of light. You won't die, and you won't be petrified. It acts like sunglasses for dark magic. Excellent engineering, Hermione,
Harry praised, snapping the goggles onto his helmet. Now, what about the acoustic threat? The creature's hiss can cause localized paralysis through fear induction. Acoustic dampeners, Ron said, holding up a pair of modified ear defenders he had enchanted. Blocks out any frequency associated with Parseltongue, but allows normal human speech to filter through via a localized sonorous link. Harry nodded, his emerald eyes sharp. Good, we have our defensive gear, but a defensive posture only delays defeat. We need an offensive strategy. We need a way to kill a 60-foot biological tank. The book says the crowing of a rooster is fatal to it, Hermione suggested. Harry scoffed. Archaic folklore. A rooster's crow is just a specific decibel of sound. If the creature is sensitive to high-frequency sonic disruptions, we don't need a farm bird. We need a localized sonic grenade. He turned to his workbench, picking up a handful of standard wizarding dung bombs. Time to empty the gunpowder and replace it with acoustic compression charms. When the serpent rears its head, we blow its eardrums out. The tactical preparations were finished just in time. 2 days later, a second attack occurred. Colin Creevey was found petrified in the hospital wing, his camera fused to his face. Dumbledore called an emergency staff meeting in the faculty lounge. Harry, having legally bound Dumbledore to transparency, was present, standing quietly in the corner. We must maintain calm, Dumbledore told the panicked teachers. If word of this reaches the parents, they will demand the school be closed. We must double the patrols and trust in the wards. The wards are useless against a threat that is already inside the perimeter, a cold voice rang out. The faculty lounge doors banged open. Lily Evans walked in, radiating absolute authority. She was flanked by 2 MACUSA Auroras. The Royal Inquisitor had arrived. Dumbledore stood up. Lily, this is an internal school matter. This is a localized biological hazard, Albus, and your internal methods have resulted in 2 casualties. Lily cut him off, slamming a heavy dossier onto the table. I have the confession of Lucius Malfoy. He planted a Class A dark artifact, a diary, on a student to open the Chamber of Secrets. We are dealing with a basilisk. Professor McGonagall gasped, clutching her chest. Snape's face went completely white. Gilderoy Lockhart, who had been hiding behind a chair, puffed out his chest. A basilisk? Fear not, my dear woman. I have dealt with lesser serpents in Wega Wega. A simple babbling curse. Lily didn't even look at him. She waved her hand dismissively. Wandless magic hit Lockhart squarely in the chest, throwing him backwards into a tapestry. He slumped to the floor, unconscious. The idiot is sidelined, Lily announced to the stunned room. As of this moment, Hogwarts is under tactical lockdown. All students are restricted to their dormitories unless accompanied by an armed faculty member. Mandatory reflective mirrors are to be placed at every corner. No student is to use the plumbing for anything other than basic necessities, and the pipes will be routinely flushed with a cactic potion to track the serpent's movements. You are turning the school into a military calbus, Lily warned, his voice heavy with sorrow. I am turning it into a survival zone, Lily shot back. She turned to Snape. Severus, I need you brewing Mandrake Restorative Draft in industrial quantities. Forget the school curriculum. Snape gave a stiff, respectful nod. It will be done, Royal Inquisitor. Lily looked at her son in the corner. Harry gave her a subtle, sharp nod. The lockdown was in effect. The board was set. Now they just had to flush the snake out of the grass.
Despite the lockdown, Quidditch was not cancelled. Lily allowed it specifically as a morale booster, though she stationed Aurors with heavy kinetic shielding charms around the pitch. Harry mounted his broom, a sleek Nimbus 2000. He didn't care about the game. Quidditch, in his mind, was a mathematically solvable equation of aerodynamics and probability. He was playing solely to maintain his cover and observe the crowd from an aerial vantage point. The whistle blew. The game against Slytherin began. Almost immediately, a heavy iron bludger broke formation. It didn't bounce between players. It locked onto Harry like a heat-seeking missile. It whistled past his ear, missing his temple by millimeters. "Harry, watch out!" Wood screamed. The bludger banked sharply and accelerated, aiming straight for Harry's chest. Most seekers would have dove, initiated a barrel roll, or tried to outrun it. Harry hovered in place. He analyzed the velocity, the mass of the iron ball, and the localized gravitational pull. He didn't pull his wand. Wands were for wizards who needed an intermediary. Harry used intent. As the bludger shot toward him at 80 miles an hour, Harry extended his left hand, his palm open. He didn't try to push it away. That would require more kinetic force than a 12-year-old could generate. Instead, he altered the magnetic field around his hand. Shift the polarity, Harry thought, creating a localized gravity well of repelling magnetic force. The bludger hit the invisible barrier 3 feet from Harry's hand. The sound was deafening, a massive crack like thunder. The iron ball shuddered violently, trapped in the magnetic stasis field, spinning furiously but unable to move forward.
The entire stadium went dead silent. Even the commentators stopped mid-sentence. They were watching a 12-year-old boy hold a cursed cannonball in midair with his bare hand. Harry casually reached into his pocket with his right hand, pulled out a thick, magically reinforced canvas bag, and dropped the spinning bludger inside. He pulled the drawstring shut. "Threat neutralized," Harry muttered. He signaled to the referee. "Time out, equipment tampering." 10 minutes later, Harry was in an empty locker room, inspecting the writhing canvas bag. With a soft pop, a small, bat-eared creature wearing a filthy pillowcase appeared in the room. House elf. "Harry Potter must go home," Dobby wailed, wringing his hands. "Dobby tried to save Harry Potter. Dobby tampered with the bludger to make Harry Potter leave." Harry looked at the elf. He didn't yell. He pulled out a notebook. "Let's apply some logic, Dobby," Harry said calmly. "You enchanted a heavy iron object to strike me at terminal velocity. The resulting blunt force trauma would have caused massive internal hemorrhaging, broken ribs, and highly probable fatalities. Your definition of saving is statistically identical to assassinating." Dobby blinked, thoroughly confused by the cold, rational vocabulary. Dobby only meant to maim." "Intent is irrelevant when the methodology is flawed," he stated. He stepped closer to the elf. "You serve the Malfoy family. Lucius Malfoy planted the diary. Did he also order you to tamper with the bludger?" "No, Master did not know. Dobby came on his own to warn the great Harry Potter. History is repeating itself." Harry's mind worked furiously. History repeating itself. The Chamber of Secrets was opened 50 years ago. Lucius Malfoy didn't create the diary. He was just the delivery mechanism. The artifact belonged to Voldemort. Voldemort was Tom Riddle. Tom Riddle was at Hogwarts 50 years ago. The equation was complete. "The chamber is a Horcrux or a parasitical memory matrix," Harry deduced aloud, his emerald eyes flashing with realization. "It's possessing a student. It's using a host to open the chamber from the inside, bypassing my mother's lockdown." He looked down at the terrified house elf. "Thank you, Dobby. You have provided actionable intelligence," Harry said, pulling his wand from his holster. "You can go back to Lucius Malfoy now, but tell him something for me." Dobby trembled. "What?" "Tell him the audit is almost complete, and the bill is coming due." Harry threw his cloak over his shoulders and sprinted out of the locker room. The tactical phase was over. It was time for the execution phase. He needed to find Ginny Weasley, and he needed to kill a basilisk. The message was scrawled on the stone wall of the second-floor corridor in glowing crimson letters. "Her skeleton will lie in the chamber forever." Ron Weasley stood before the wall, his face the color of old parchment. "Ginny," he whispered, his voice cracking. "It's Ginny. The monster took her." Harry Potter didn't panic. He didn't gasp. He immediately checked his watch, noting the time of discovery, and then tapped the enchanted comlink in his ear. "Command, this is Potter. We have a hostile abduction. Target is Ginny Weasley. The biological threat is active. I am initiating the descent protocol." "Copy that, Hawk," Lily's voice replied, crisp and devoid of maternal coddling. She was currently in London, dismantling the government, but she had authorized this operation. "You are clear to engage. Do not rely on visual confirmation. Trust your instruments, and bring her back." "Understood." He turned to Ron and Hermione. They were standing in his makeshift fourth-floor war room. The time for theory was over. "Ron, look at me," he commanded. His voice was a calm, steady anchor in the middle of a hurricane. Ron's terrified blue eyes met Harry's focused emerald ones. "Fear is a physiological response. Acknowledge it, box it, and put it away. We have the tactical advantage. We know the terrain, we know the enemy's biology, and we have the countermeasures. You are not a victim today. You are a highly calibrated operative. Are we clear?" Ron swallowed hard, his fists clenched. Volcanic receded, replaced by a cold, desperate resolve. "Clear." "Gear up," he ordered. They moved with practice efficiency. Hermione handed out the polarized reflective visors, snapping them tightly over their eyes. The world tinted into a muted, metallic gray, heavily filtering light. Next came the acoustic dampeners, earpieces that neutralized all frequencies outside of their localized sonorous communication loop. Harry strapped his rigid hornbeam wand to his forearm holster. He strapped a secondary rig across his chest, loaded with modified dung bombs, re-engineered into high-yield sonic disruptors, and chemical flares. They moved out, a 3-person tactical strike team walking through the eerily empty halls of Hogwarts. They bypassed the terrified faculty entirely. They entered Moaning Myrtle's bathroom. Harry walked directly to the copper tap engraved with a tiny snake. He didn't wave his wand. He accessed the specific vocal cord mutation required to produce the acoustic frequency. "Open," he hissed. The sink sank into the floor, revealing a massive, dark pipe. "Deploy kinetic anchors," he said. They cast localized cushioning charms on their boots. "Drop." They slid down the pipe into the darkness, the miles of ancient plumbing rushing past them. They hit the damp stone floor of a subterranean tunnel with a soft, magically absorbed thud. The air smelled of decay and ancient water. "Weapons free," he whispered through the comms. "Stay out of the center line. Move."
The Chamber of Secrets was vast, a cavernous monument to megalomania. Towering stone pillars entwined with carved serpents disappeared into the gloom. At the far end stood a colossal monkey-like statue of Salazar Slytherin. At the base of the statue lay Ginny Weasley, pale and motionless. Standing over her was a teenage boy with dark hair and a prefect's badge, Tom Riddle. "She won't wake," Riddle said smoothly as the trio approached. He smiled, a charming, venomous expression. "She's still alive, but only just. The diary is draining her life force into me. Soon, Lord Voldemort will return." "Tom Riddle," Harry said, his voice modulated and devoid of inflection through the comlink. "A parasitic memory matrix utilizing a human battery to achieve physical manifestation. You aren't a Dark Lord. You're malware." Riddle's smile vanished. "You dare speak to me with such disrespect. I am the heir of Slytherin. I command the greatest beast." "You command a highly evolved biological weapon that relies on an easily mitigated visual cognitohazard," Harry interrupted, stepping forward in his tactical gear. "Your entire strategy relies on the ignorance of your victims. We are not ignorant." Riddle sneered. He turned to the statue and hissed, "Speak to me, Slytherin, greatest of the Hogwarts Four." The stone mouth of the statue ground open. A massive, horrific sound echoed from within, the slithering of scales over stone. A 60-foot serpent, brilliantly green and terrifyingly thick, dropped to the chamber floor. "Kill them," Riddle commanded. "Visors down, acoustic dampeners active," Harry shouted. The basilisk reared back, its massive yellow eyes locking onto the trio. The lethal magical radiation of its gaze washed over them. Hermione's polarized lenses sparked, the magic bouncing endlessly between the reflective layers until it dissipated into a harmless puff of static electricity. Harry didn't die. He didn't even petrify. The basilisk hesitated, confused by its biological failure. "Ron, deploy flash," Harry ordered. Ron hurled 3 chemical flares. They detonated in midair with blinding magnesium-white intensity. The basilisk, a subterranean creature adapted to darkness, shrieked as its sensitive optic nerves were completely overloaded. It thrashed blindly, its tail smashing a stone pillar into rubble. "Hermione, sonic disruption, now." Hermione threw the modified dung bombs. They didn't produce a foul odor. They produced a concussive shockwave of highly concentrated sound. The explosions hit the snake's auditory receptors. The basilisk's equilibrium shattered. It writhed on the floor, disoriented, bleeding from its ears, striking blindly at the walls. "No! Use your venom! Smell them!" Riddle screamed, his projection flickering with rage. The basilisk recovered enough to lunge toward the sound of Harry's boots splashing in the water. Its massive fangs, dripping with toxic venom, snapped inches from Harry's face. Harry didn't retreat. He stood his ground in the center of the flooded chamber. He didn't draw the sword of Gryffindor. He didn't need archaic steel. He needed physics. He aimed his hornbeam wand at the ceiling, then at the flooded floor where the basilisk was currently grounded. Fulmen Maxima. Harry didn't just cast a lightning spell. He channeled the atmospheric static electricity of the deep cavern, using his wand as a grounding rod and the water as a hyperconductive network. A localized 1 million volt bolt of raw plasma erupted from his wand. It struck the water. The electrical current surged through the puddle, instantly connecting with the basilisk's damp scales. The massive serpent convulsed violently. Its nervous system, overloaded by the catastrophic electrical discharge, instantly fried. The creature let out one final, gurgling hiss and crashed to the stone floor. Its brain dead, its heart stopped. The king of serpents had been executed by basic chemistry and thermodynamics. Silence fell over the chamber, broken only by the sizzling of ozone and the dripping of water. Tom Riddle stared at the smoking, lifeless corpse of his ultimate weapon, his face contorted in a mask of absolute fury. You killed it," Riddle hissed, his form flickering wildly as the diary struggled to maintain his projection. "You insolent half-blood. It doesn't matter. Once the girl is dead, I will be physical. I will kill you myself." Harry walked calmly over to where Ginny lay. Next to her was the small black diary. "Don't touch it, Harry," Hermione warned over the comms, keeping her wand trained on Riddle. "The book is the anchor." Most wizards, driven by adrenaline, would have grabbed a basilisk fang and stabbed the book. Dumbledore would have approved of the dramatic, destructive flair. Harry Potter was an auditor. He didn't destroy evidence, he contained it.
Stabbing a highly condensed soul container with a volatile corrosive like basilisk venom carries a 78% probability of triggering a magical detonation or allowing the soul fragment to flee to a new host, Harry explained mechanically. He reached into his tactical vest. He pulled out a small, heavy box made of magically reinforced lead, lined with a vacuum seal charm. It was a containment unit Lily had designed for transporting highly radioactive or cursed artifacts. Harry didn't touch the diary with his hands. He levitated it with a precise flick of his wand and dropped it into the lead box. "What are you doing?" Riddle demanded, his voice suddenly sounding panicked. Harry slammed the lid of the box shut and engaged the locking rooms. Inside the box there was no light, no sound, no air, and no magical resonance. The diary was completely isolated from the physical world. Without the connection to its host, Tom Riddle's projection gasped. The energy siphon was severed. "No!" Riddle shrieked. "You can't!" His voice cut out. His form dissolved into mist, sucked back through the microscopic quantum connection into the diary, which was now entombed in lead. Ginny Weasley took a sudden deep breath, her color instantly returning. Her eyes fluttered open. Ron dropped to his knees, ripping off his visor and pulling his sister into a desperate hug. Ginny sobbed, burying her face in his shoulder. Harry tapped his comlink. "Command, this is Potter. The Basilisk has been neutralized. The hostile artifact has been secured in a Class 3 containment unit. The hostage is alive and conscious. Mission accomplished. Requesting extraction." "Copy that, Hawk," Lily's voice came back, thick with the pride she rarely showed. "Extraction team is inbound. Excellent work. Now, come home. I'm just finishing up here."
While Harry was neutralizing a biological weapon in a dungeon, Lily Evans was neutralizing a political cancer in the heart of London. The Wizengamot chambers were packed, but the seating arrangement was vastly different. Half of the plum-colored robes were missing, their seats empty. The remaining members sat in terrified silence. Lily stood at the podium in the center of the room. She looked impeccable, a terrifying force of modern authority surrounded by archaic stone. To her left stood Director Hawthorne of MI5. To her right, a grim-faced MACUSA liaison. "The Sovereign Audit has concluded its primary phase," Lily announced, her voice magically amplified to reach the highest tiers. "The results of the mandatory competency and ethical testing are a matter of public record. Furthermore, the interrogations conducted under Veritaserum have yielded undeniable proof of systemic corruption, bribery, and treason against the Crown." She projected a massive magical display above her. It showed ledger after ledger of Gringotts transactions. Cornelius Fudge. Lily read the name like a death sentence. Removed from office. Currently facing charges of criminal negligence and accepting bribes from known terrorist financiers. The Crown has appointed Amelia Bones as the interim Minister of Magic, effective immediately, under the direct supervision of this audit. Amelia Bones, a stern, fair witch with a monocle, stood up from the front row and gave a crisp nod. "Lucius Malfoy," Lily continued, and the display shifted to a moving photograph of Malfoy sitting in a concrete muggle interrogation room, looking utterly broken. "Arrested. His assets have been seized by the Crown. He has confessed to planting a Class A dark artifact at Hogwarts School, which resulted in the localized biological hazard we neutralized just an hour ago." Gasps of horror rippled through the chamber. "The pureblood hegemony is over," Lily stated, her green eyes sweeping across the room, pinning the remaining aristocrats to their seats. "You will no longer buy your way out of justice. You will no longer hide behind outdated blood status laws. You will pass standard competency exams to hold office. You will integrate modern legal practices into your judiciary system. And if any of you ever attempt to finance, harbor, or support the terrorist known as Voldemort," she leaned forward, her voice dropping to a dangerous, lethal register, "I will not send you to Azkaban. I will hand you over to Her Majesty's Secret Service, and you will disappear into a world that does not care about your magic. The rot has been cut out. It is time to rebuild the foundation." She slammed her gavel down. The sound echoed like a gunshot. The Ministry of Magic, as it had existed for centuries, was dead. The end of the school year arrived with a surreal sense of calm. The students were unpetrified, the Mandrake draft having worked perfectly. The castle was no longer a war zone. It was a school again. Harry stood in the headmaster's office. His tactical gear was packed away. He wore his standard Gryffindor uniform. Albus Dumbledore sat behind his desk. He looked deeply exhausted. The events of the year had aged him. He had been forced to watch from the sidelines as a mother and son dismantled a threat he had spent 50 years plotting against. On the desk between them sat the heavy lead containment box. "Harry," Dumbledore began softly. "The artifact, the diary. I must insist it be handed over to me. It contains dark magic of a nature I must study. I believe it is a Horcrux." "I am aware of what a Horcrux is, Professor," Harry said calmly. a parasital anchor tying a soul fragment to the physical plane, which is exactly why you are not taking it. Dumbledore frowned. Harry, it must be destroyed with basilisk venom or fiend fire. Destroying it releases the magical kinetic energy and simply removes an asset from our board, a voice said from the doorway. Lily Evans stepped into the office, carrying a briefcase. She walked over to the desk and picked up the lead box. This is evidence of treason, Lily said, looking down at Dumbledore. By the authority of the royal mandate, I am confiscating it. It will be stored in a highly classified, magically dead vault operated jointly by MACUSA and MI5. We are going to study the soul fragment. We are going to find its resonance frequency. And when Voldemort returns, we won't be guessing where his other anchors are. We will track them using this one. Dumbledore looked at the box, realizing he had lost completely. His grand design, his secretive, manipulative war, had been replaced by a highly efficient, government-backed military operation. You are changing the very nature of our world, Lily said quietly. Your world was dying, Albus, Lily replied. I'm just giving it a chance to survive. She turned to Harry. Ready to go, Hawk? Affirmative, Harry said. They walked out of the headmaster's office, leaving the old man to his spinning silver instruments and his empty plans. The Hogwarts Express ride back to London was peaceful. Ron and Hermione sat with Harry, a new dynamic forged between them. They weren't just friends playing at being heroes anymore. They had survived a tactical strike. They had executed a mission. So, Hermione said, looking at Harry with profound respect, what happens next year? Harry looked out the window. The British countryside was a blur of green. He touched the hornbeam wand in his holster. The Ministry was purged. The Basilisk was dead. One Horcrux was contained. But the primary target was still out there. Next year, Harry said. His emerald eyes reflected the passing landscape. We stop playing defense. We have the crown. We have the intelligence. Next year, we start hunting. He leaned back in his seat, the boy who lived transitioning fully into the architect of Voldemort's inevitable, highly calculated destruction. The end of year 2. That wraps up year 2 of the Emerald Enigma. The Ministry is purged, the Basilisk is dead, and now the true hunt begins. But I need your orders for the next mission. Comment year 3 if you want to see Harry and Lily launch a global tactical strike to hunt down Voldemort's remaining Horcruxes, or comment new if you want a completely different what-if scenario. The majority rules, so cast your vote down below. Tell me what you thought of this tactic.